Welcome back to the Hockey Axe podcast. I am Mason Hackle. This is the podcast all about studying the best athletes in the world, and this is the best hockey players in the world, and making that into an accessible system that anybody can use to get the same exact abilities as these athletes and these hockey players at the same time. This is the latest podcast that I've ever shot, and I'm going to have to keep things short here just because, well, it's almost my bedtime, but I just have to talk. I have to talk about this. This is absolutely ridiculous now that I think about it. So like there's these, I put out, I'll just say it like this. There was some discussions in my commentary and in the comment sections on all my videos. And my general policy is that I keep up any comments that are productive, which means that if they degrade into any, sort of name calling or vitriol or labeling or just general assumptions of things that people didn't say or trying to mind read, then I immediately delete those comments, no matter what is in the content, no matter if it's actually good information or not. If there's anything that has any sort of labeling, mind reading, changing of the subject, general presumptions and vitriol in any part of the language, that immediately gets taken off, because you people don't need to put that type of language into a comment, because that's honestly fucking stupid. I know I just did it there when I said I was effing stupid, but still, that's very stupid to do that, and it doesn't advance the discussion. Actually, we're all here for things that are productive, and when you do things that are counterproductive, things do not move forward. Anyway, we were talking about, it was about what was it? One of the programs that I put out, and in partnership with a few of the companies that I work with. I'll just leave their names out of the equation, but people know who I work with anyway. Like, any of the programs that I have created, or anyone who I worked with has, as I take a sip of water, has had the same layout and structure of people who, have taught me very well. I've worked closely with Ben Patrick. I've worked closely with Ben Clearfield. I've worked closely with all the people in Athletic Truth Group. I've worked closely with people in Train 2.0 hockey, just so I get the hockey side in addition to the, athletic side. And that is where I get all my programming. And what they're really good at is exactly the same thing that I study, because they got me to study these things where you're looking at what the best athletes can do, and you don't immediately look at studies, or you don't let studies of the past block you from the new insights from today, because things are constantly innovating. That's kind of something that the original mentor for ATG, Charles Poliquin, was really, really good at accepting, was that some of his work 20 to 30 years later would actually be proven in science, even if it wasn't proven in science 20 or 30 years that beforehand that he was talking about it. And so, and part of that's why I don't reference studies in any of my posts or things like that, is because, one, if you look at the actual psychology of studies, they're actually not persuasive. Second thing is that you don't need something that's in PubMed or any clinical trial necessarily, although it's helpful evidence, in order to do something pragmatic or act upon the world. More often than not, studies do not tell you how to act in the world. They just tell you information. And we live in an information age up the wazoo. And we're not designed to be computers that store up information. We're designed to be people of action, and to take the little bit that we know of and act upon it. And because we're trying to live, whereas computers are designed to store, like we don't have that ability. And when we try to have that ability, you get this overload of information. And I know for a lot of people, that's very overwhelming. And the reason that it's overwhelming is, again, that's more precedence to the fact that we are not designed to store information. We're designed to act upon the little bits of information that we have, whether they're like end up being right or wrong in the long term. Obviously, you want the things to be right in the long term so that you keep living if that's what you want to do, which I would say like 99.9999999% of people want to do. But anyway, that's kind of like the first thing to establish, because now we get into the actual discussion itself, which was why like I train knee flexion like at all with different hamstring curls. I think actually it was more the hypertrophy range, which I don't know what this person defines as that. It's more just, I think he took a quick look. He misrepresented the actual repetitions and structure that was in my program. But like regardless of that, it quickly degraded into, name calling and things like that. And this guy is actually a prominent coach in the hockey sphere, in the hockey training sphere, I should say. Former pro player, I think played in the NHL about 10 years ago or so. And he wasn't like a scorer or anything, because I compared him with Marty St. Louis, which was getting to the actual discussion about knee flexion. I compared him with Marty St. Louis and told him like, yeah, you're not training knee flexion and you were slower than this guy. And this guy had the longest longevity speed case of any hockey player in history. And he overcame some genetics too to be faster, because he did some training to make him faster. And he was one of the only player to successfully do a Nordic hamstring curl with full repetitions in it at the time that his coach, at the time that he was doing it, his coach Ben Prentice said that he was the only hockey player who could do that Nordic hamstring curl. Now I'm getting word from a father of an NHLer that actually these more and more NHLers can do this full Nordic hamstring curl. I would assume it's the players that are fast, but if they're not fast, and that's actually pretty interesting. But there's too much correlation, even though correlation is not causation, but there's too much correlation that sprinting speed actually translates to on-ice speed, and horizontal strength correlates to horizontal speed. I should correct that. Horizontal speed, which is skating speed, and it is sprinting speed, they actually translate very well. Now, there are some mechanical differences. Obviously, skating and sprinting are not the same, because ice and ground are not the same, and also a foot and a skate are not the same. But at the same time, like, I had to make that comparison because, again, this guy played at a time where he was playing against someone who trained knee flexion religiously and all the time. And I'm saying that this guy didn't, because he's slower than Marty St. Louis, and he didn't last in the league as long as Marty St. Louis, and he didn't dominate in the league as long as Marty St. Louis did, when Marty St. Louis was never supposed to be someone who was ever good. Like little munchkin, and was undrafted, scratched out of the league in his first season. He had to build his way up, and all accounts, it looks like he did that by training. He's someone who went from 50th to the top 10, which actually, if you really think about it, those case studies are way more interesting and way more compelling than someone who went from number 5 to number 1. Someone who was already great got even greater. It's like, okay, that was going to happen. But someone who's like bottom 50 or bottom 100 going into the top 20, maybe top 10, that's someone that you look at, because they're overcoming something that should not have happened. They're overcoming something. And like that's what my training is all about. It's focused on making that type of transformation. That's the exact transformation that I made. I was never supposed to be good. I was never good. You look up my elite prospects page again, 0 points. That was 6 years ago. I spent those 6 years rebuilding my fucking self to the point that I'm now of the abilities of the best hockey players in the world. And that is the truth. You don't need any scientific studies to look that up, because this is, in fact, in of itself, a case study, because there was success created out of this. And success leaves clues. You can study people's success and dissect that into your own abilities and what you do in everything that you do. There's a reason that that's a mantra, and that's a way of, dissecting what the best people at anything in any enterprise do. Success leaves clues. Like, that gets really deep really quickly. That is why success leaves clues is why I don't have to reference any studies. Success leaves clues is why I can look at the best players only and not have to worry about any scientific studies, not have to worry about getting blocked by any scientific studies, because, this is what the literature says. It's like, I don't fucking care what the literature says if it doesn't line up with people's success. Like, by the way, all the literature that I was told in like school and things like that did not help me at all with making money. Like, there's nothing in school that tells you about that. So it's like, but then you still have these people who make billions of dollars. They have a success that you don't have, that isn't commonly taught. Success leaves clues. You don't need a fucking scientific study to look at that. It's the same thing that happened with people like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon to a degree, any of these modern best players who are good and were good growing up. They were doing the same things that everyone else was doing, and yet they had a different result. I will guarantee you that plenty of players have gone through the same hockey school that Connor McDavid did growing up. Why are they all having different results than Connor McDavid? You have Connor McDavid and Jack Hughes who went through that school. Probably some more players that I can't think of at the top of my head, but those are the two prominent ones that went out of that same hockey school that they were in when they were 13 or so. They have something going for them that no other player has. They have a success that is leaving clues that, even though they're doing the same things that these other players are doing, supposedly, they are still getting different results. And I'm sure that this former pro player, who I don't want to model, by the way, because he's choosing to argue and assume with me rather than actually train like a pro athlete. The other thing is that he's using the retired label to make up all these different drills and things like that, and call them drills, when really he's just a monkey with a bunch of tools and not actually having anything that's focused and measurable and standardized and actually gets you hey, you need to master this basic to get this effing good if you get this effing good at this basic, you will be top tier in terms of your ability. I haven't seen anything like that from him. It's just more workouts that goof around and things like that, which you can do as a retired player. But I'm not trying to model a retired player. I'm trying to model people and players and athletes who are at the top of their game. That's where my training comes in. And that's a different success, if you want to call it that I'm not trying to model. Obviously there's clues to what this guy is setting. And I know that these clues do not align up with the clues of the best hockey players on the planet, because he wasn't that. just a retired pro player. It's like, okay, you're not McDavid. You're not Crosby. You're not McKinnon. You're not Makar. You're not, name every other player who I like have, talked about. You're not those guys. It's like, okay, I'm not trying to model you. It's the same thing with every other, pro hockey player who's been hurt by me, which, look, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, which is like, for me to say that to a group of men who, go out and try to act tough and fight all the time, which is actually not toughness. It's more just like play and showmanship, toughness. Like you guys would get beaten up in MMA so quickly. And I actually mean that, like that would not go over that well. You're so broken down and injured, and you play through injury all the time. And then you like try to act like, yeah, I can push through it. And then snap, there goes your fucking hip and your knee and more concussions down the road. It's like, you guys are fucking idiots. But like they try to act tough and then they just get beaten up. And like, I'm saying that's honestly pathetic, because again, you're not these top tier players, which is who I'm looking after. And by the way, those aren't the players who are against me. It's all these former pros and retired pros and lower level pros. The reason that they're upset with me is because I'm not modeling them, and that I'm not giving the results that they're getting, because they're getting crappy results. Because again, they're not McDavid, they're not Crosby, they're not McKinnon, they're not, all these other players. I don't want them to be either, because as long as they exist, one, that just means that their hate against me just means I'm doing something, correct. Because as long as they're doing the hating and it's not McKinnon or Crosby or McDavid or any of these players who I'm actually studying and don't need any science to study them, and any of these other best athletes who I don't need science to study them, I just need to be around people who are better at something than me, and I don't consider these pro players better than me at 1, thinking, 2, ability, and 3, actual competence in this field. And like, it's not who I'm modeling. It's not who I'm teaching anyone who wants to go through Hockey Hacks to model to. It's honestly stupid. And that's why I'm very critical of these pro players. Unless like they want my help, which is like they're not asking for it. And it's a really stupid way to ask me for it if they want help. It's honestly pathetic to just say like, and not actually learn. It's actually very not humble, which you get every single contradiction on this checklist of what hockey players are supposed to be. And you get every single pro athlete who's not a Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon or Cale Makar, any one of these modern greats. And like, that's what feeds into the argument with the programming, where it's like, I don't care what other coaches program. Like, I'm not going to go on their pages like what this guy did and question the programming, because I'm going to let the results speak for themselves. Because this is actually going to change players because it's so super. Nothing is as focused on the basics or on basics, because there's a time and place to redefine the basics, as Hockey Hacks. Nothing is as focused on it. Nothing is as focused as the standards here. Nothing is as focused on athletic standards that people at ATG have done. Like, if you want an athletic example from them, another athletic example, their basketball games have a group of the highest jumpers in the world. There's no question about it. Everyone has a 50-inch vertical there. Well, not everyone, because Ben is 42.5, but still, it's like everyone's jumping like 45 to 50 inches on their vertical. It's all because they've done these principles of athletic training. I'm literally just taking those principles and putting it into hockey training, and then merging that with mechanics matching, which has also been, let's say, scientists, or uses the scientific method, which is actual studying, and dissects what the best hockey players can do, making that more accessible for everyone, which is fundamentally my mission at Hockey Hacks. That's what we do here. That's my personal mission. That's what Hockey Hacks is, which is, it's my company, but it's a representation of me. And that's all we're doing. Just making it more accessible. We don't need these studies to block us from actually moving forward, because they do block us, and basically they get recycled they get rethought of every 20 years or so. So it's like, if that's just going to happen with the studies, instead of, I would rather risk not taking the moral high ground that comes with being wrong with a scientific study, to then be right about it 20 years later, because that's usually what happens with this stuff. And like, I have enough of a social proof and with my friends at ATG already that I don't have to worry about these studies, because I'm already doing the study on myself. I am a case study. Any one of my clients is a case study. Anyone at ATG is a case study. Because all we're doing is just training athleticism and ability. We're just training ability. And we're going to continue to do that. Not only change people's lives, but create athletes en masse, and give people a better quality of life, give players a way better performance by focus and direction and just extreme mastery of fundamentals in movement, both on and off the ice. And that's what we're doing. ATG is going to continue to do that with all people of all types, all athletes of all types. I'm going to continue to do it with hockey players and anyone who I train as a personal training client. And this podcast has gone on for 20 minutes again, so I'm going to pause it there. I want to go to bed, but this definitely needed to be talked about. I think, that guy's a clown. There's no question about it. Like, if you're coming to me complaining about different studies that I don't reference or things like that, I don't know, when you were slower than, you played against Marty St. Louis, who trained something that you didn't train, and was actually faster than you and stayed in the league longer and trained his way to success. What I'm looking at with him, by the way, is that he was fast for the longest time, like into his mid to late 30s. He was still fast. By the time that he retired, he was still fast. It was because of his training. We don't need an insane study to reference that. And everyone who I'm working with at ATG is also a case study and on athleticism. This guy can continue to train however he wants to train. I'm not telling him to change his mind, because he's not going to. But it's still an absolute joke, I think, that a former pro hockey player who was not, one of the best players is trying to shut me down just because he disagrees with my style of training. And not only disagrees with it, but will actively try to shut it down. one thing to disagree with it, like you just don't follow me or don't talk to me and anything like that. It's another thing to like actively say, like you're hurting people, which like you have no evidence for that. I have no evidence for you to say that, so I'm not going to say that to you. But it's just stupid, fundamentally. Because maybe I'm talking about something that's true, that this guy just doesn't want to believe. Again, he's a pretty prominent figure. Congrats to him for, that fame. I don't care. The fame that he has doesn't make him correct. I don't think he's correct on the body's abilities. I don't think he's correct on athleticism. I don't think he's correct in his training. I don't think he's correct in his hockey abilities. Okay. I'm not going to go further than that. I hope he doesn't too. I hope he just stops and just lets this go by, which is probably what's gonna happen. And I'll let it stop there as well. But yeah, it's just stupid. That's all. If for anyone who is cool with me and followed me for a while, I don't take it personally. I was just well, this is why I train this. And he was like, yeah, you're fucking stupid. And I'm like, okay, blocked. That's it. So, and that's the difference between his training and my training. That's all I listed. That's it. I do stuff that's more focused. He plays around with more toys. Okay. It's everyone's free to do what they want. That's what we're doing. But to claim that we're training wrong or that we're hurting people is no, that's a step too far. Because I don't claim that about anybody. I think the only people who actually make those claims are actually doing something, destructive themselves. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks for listening. I'm going to go to bed. Jesus, it is late for me. I'll see you next time.